Some killers get an astonishing amount of infamy during their time in the media, but only very few have shaped pop culture around them. That happens to be the case of the notorious killer Ed Gein. Your average horror fan may know of this, but Ed Gein was the inspiration for many classic horror movies. He inspired characters like Norman Bates in Psycho and Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Ed was born August 27, 1906, to an alcoholic father and a religious fanatic mother. Ed, like the character he inspired, Norman Bates, was obsessed with his mother. Even after her death in 1945, he was still completely devoted to her. Something truly changed in Gein after her death, and became horribly deranged, never being able to properly move on. Ed Gein would soon descend into a bottomless pit of madness, one he would never be able to crawl out of. He began to sneak into local graveyards late at night and would dig up the bodies of recently buried females. He would bring the corpses back to his home and do disturbing things to them, and would even cut off body parts, keeping certain parts as trophies. Ed would later dabble in what investigators would later call human taxidermy. During this time of Ed's newfound hobby, he only managed to kill 2 people. So, even though what Ed did was despicable, he is still not technically a serial killer. Some years later, Ed would go on to confess his crimes. The investigators had no idea what they were in store for when searching Gein's home. Police discovered some of Ed's trophies, including a human skin apron, skin gloves, skin pants, nipple belt, bowls made out of human skulls, a fridge filled with human parts believed to have maybe been eaten by him, and lastly, the most iconic piece found, a mask made out of human skin. Eventually, Ed Gein was found guilty of murder and was placed in criminal psychiatric care. During this time, he was placed in several different institutions. July 26, 1984, at the age of 77, Ed Gein died of respiratory and heart failure due to cancer.
On May 26, 2012, the world would be infamously introduced to Rudy Eugene, better known as the Miami Zombie. 31-year-old Rudy began his day with a casual drive to the beautiful Miami beach. Sometime after arriving at the beach, the man abandoned his car and began to strip completely naked, heading west, according to eyewitness testimony. Approximately at 1:55 p.m., Rudy encountered a 65-year-old homeless man named Ronald Papo. Though, this wasn't technically the first time the two men had met. Earlier that year, Rudy met Ronald while working to help the homeless in the Miami area. Seemingly out of nowhere, Rudy pounced on the poor old man. He first stripped Ronald of his pants. Then, he began to devour his face. The whole horrific scene was captured on camera. After some time, a passing cyclist saw what was going on and quickly contacted Miami police. It only took a few minutes for Officer Jose Ramirez to arrive at the shocking scene. At first, Officer Ramirez wasn't sure as to what he was looking at. But after a few moments, it dawned on him that Rudy Eugene was feasting on the poor old homeless man. Officer Ramirez pulled out his gun, aimed it at Rudy, and warned him to stop attacking the man. Rudy ignored Ramirez until he finally turned around to hiss at the officer, before turning back around and continuing his tragic feast. At last, the attack ended when Officer Ramirez shot and killed Rudy at 2:13 p.m. Ronald Papo was quickly rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Papo was left with 80% of his face missing and one eye completely gouged out. After multiple reconstructive surgeries, Ronald was finally done, but was left permanently disfigured and completely blind. Perhaps the most tragic part is that the last thing Ronald will ever remember seeing is Rudy's face as he viciously attacked him. In total, Papo lost his nose, eyebrows, cheek, and left eye. A fund was set up to help Ronald and it raised over $100,000. Rudy's toxicology report came out, and what was discovered had set this already media giant case into a frenzy. At first, a report came out claiming that he had used a street drug known as bath salts, but that turned out to be false. The only substance he tested positive for was cannabis, but an expert in toxicology said that cannabis was not the cause for Rudy's horrific behavior. It is still truly unknown as to why Rudy attacked Ronald in the first place.
Jeffrey Dahmer is a name that will forever be attached to many insidious crimes, but for 17 men, their name will also be attached to his name, the name of their killer. On May 21st, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Jeffrey Dahmer was born. Dahmer, unlike many serial killers, did not have an abusive upbringing, though they did say years later that his home life was a bit hectic with his parents constant arguing with one another. At an early age, Jeffrey would collect dead animals on the side of the road and take them home to dismember. This fixation with animals did not pass. Jeffrey even kept parts of these animals in jars inside the family tool shed, and he even explained this to a friend at the time, telling him how he wanted to see how each animal fit together. One such terrible act Jeremy committed was when he killed a dog, severing its head and impaling it on a stake behind the family's home. Sadly for the 17 men and young boys who would meet their doom by the hands of Jeffrey, his fixation of animals would grow tiresome, and a new hobby would take its place. That new hobby being cannibalism. Soon after graduating high school, Jeffrey would kill his first victim. Stephen Hicks was hitchhiking when he was picked up by Jeffrey and brought back to his family's home. Dahmer quickly got the young man drunk, and after some time, Stephen wanted to leave. However, Jeffrey was not going to allow that to happen. Jeffrey grabbed a barbell and hit Hicks over the head with it repeatedly until the man was dead. Dahmer quickly dismembered the body, putting pieces of the man into plastic bags and burying them behind his family's home. This would spawn the first of many murders Jeffrey Dahmer would commit. Dahmer began to frequent many gay bars in order to meet men who would become potential victims more easily. He would usually lure these men in by promising them money and sexual acts in order to get them back to his apartment, where Dahmer's true colors would show. Once he got the men back home, he would drug them and typically strangle them to death. Once they were dead, Jeffrey would perform many horrible acts, one such act being necrophilia. Dahmer would then dismember the bodies, keeping his favorite parts, such as genitals and skulls. Dahmer would soon fill his fridge with multiple different body parts of men and condiments to eat them with. Jeffrey also loved to take photos of his victims after killing them, in order to remember each and every one. Jeffrey also experimented with bodies, trying numerous times to perform a human lobotomy on a victim before death in order to create a sexual zombie. He never achieved his goal and failed each lobotomy he gave. Unfortunately for Dahmer, one man escaped his house of horrors and ran to the police. The police soon went to Jeffrey's home and he politely let them in. The first thing they saw was pictures all around the place of dismembered bodies. The officers restrained Dahmer and called for backup, but little did they know that they were dealing with one of the biggest serial killers in American history. Soon after his arrest, Dahmer was put on trial where he was found guilty and sentenced to 15 life sentences, which is equivalent to 957 years. On November 28, 1994, Jeffrey Dahmer was forced to work with 2 other prisoners, with the group only being alone for 20 minutes. When the guards returned, they found one inmate that looked as though he had been beaten to death, and Jeffrey with his skull completely crushed.
Mohammed Arif and Mohammed Farman are 2 average brothers living together in Pakistan. But underneath their facade lies a cannibalistic duo with insatiable appetites. In 2011, the brothers would face their first, but not last, round of the prison system. After getting caught digging up and eating 150 bodies from a local cemetery, the brothers were sentenced to 2 years in prison. They were eventually released on May 2013, moving back to their small village of Kawarwar Kalan. At first, it would have maybe seemed as though the brothers were back to living their lives peacefully and quietly. That is, until the neighbors began to smell something foul coming from the brothers' house. After a while, one of the residents got concerned of the stench and called the police. Eventually, the police arrived and raided the Arif's house. What they found still haunts them to this day. During their investigation, police would discover the body of a 2-year-old boy being cooked in a pot of curry. They probably dug up his body from a grave, said the local police chief, after someone asked how they obtained the body. At one point in time, before they began devouring rotting flesh, the 2 had lived normal lives, both even being married. But that all came crashing down after their initial arrest. After the body of the 2-year-old boy was discovered, police quickly got Arif to confess. At first, Arif admitted to chopping up the body, but blames it on his elder brother, Farman. Trails of ants were also found in his home, leading to the underneath of his bed, where bags of body parts were being kept. In the middle of the room, I saw a cooking pot, which was half full of meat curry. Nearby was a wooden board, a butcher's axe, and a large kitchen knife. Bits of fat clung to the board and the blade of the axe. It still gives me the creeps, Police Inspector Fakhar Bhatti said. After some time, the brothers both faced trial and were sentenced to 12 years in prison. The reason the brothers kept getting short sentences is due to the fact that as of right now, their country has no laws against cannibalism. The brothers were only convicted of defiling a grave, destroying property, and disseminating fear.